start. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today I will be giving a speech on the country of Haiti and its origins from a slave country to the country that it is today. So, to start off, I will be saying that before Haiti became Haiti, it was a small island with the Arawak Indians, who were also called the Taino or the Carib Indians. But they shortly died off because of diseases caused by the invasions of the Europeans. Haiti was acquired by the French and was bought by Spain in 1697. And through this, Spain wanted Haiti because Haiti was a great agricultural source of sugarcane and coffee. So they basically wanted to take Haiti and use it as an economical growth for them as a nation. So they came and they established a colony and they called it Santo Domingo. So, how African slave labor vitalized Santo Domingo, because one, it was free labor for them. They didn't have to pay them, and the transportation to get them there was easy due to the Atlantic slave trade. So, lots of slaves came when the revenue of the crops boomed, and the slaves came by thousands. So, 800,000 slaves arrived during the French colonial rule to the island, which made up a third of the transatlantic slave trade. And many of the slaves died because of the harsh conditions and the diseases of the plantations they were working on. Now that I told you about how slave labor played a role and how it grew their development, I will now talk about how Haiti gained its independence. By the end of the 18th century, the slaves of Santo Domingo began to unravel. Well, one, because the slaves began to leave the plantations and create rival groups. Two, they established runaway slave communities within the colony, and through this established militant. And the militant was very important because it plays a role in how they end up rebelling, because they use the militant to create army forces. So the militant began to pose a threat to the Spanish and the French because they were using the militants and all of them to create and boost morale for the slaves that were on the plantation. So they began to realize that they could be their own people in their own nation, and that was bad for the plantation owners because then they were being able to think, oh, we're our own people, so we can do whatever we want now. So that's when they started to rebel. So from the overwhelming and growing tensions, the Creole royalists and the French began to prepare for war, and that war changed a lot of things in the history of Haiti developing as a nation. So in 1791, Toussaint Louverture, who was the leader of the rebel forces of the black slaves, helped lead the army to rebel against the French and Spanish rule. So Toussaint Louverture studied military campaigns from Julius Caesar and used that strategy to be able to create the army and lead the Haitian people to their independence. How did he do this? He had the leadership skills to give the rebellion what it needed and gave them the organization that they needed from previous years when they tried to rebel but couldn't because of not having the resources and the organization and the people to lead and such. So through this and going through all the war and this long stretch of war, he gained control of all the rebellion forces and eventually in 1800 captured the Spanish port of Santo Domingo, which gave him control of the whole island. And this is important because from this point on, this is when Haiti really began to get its independence. And even though they had this war and everything, and they finished the war, they still didn't end up getting their independence until 1804. So in 1804, Haiti officially gained its independence, and even though then they were independent, they were still very isolated because of the war. So there's also this thing where after the war happened, the French claimed that Haiti owed them money, and even now to this day, they're still paying reparations on that war, even though, one, they didn't necessarily start the war, and they won the war, and they're still paying reparations on that war that they won. So, with the many prosperous people that Haiti has today, it is considered a third world country, and they struggled in their early years after gaining independence, and still to this day, with unable to have effective leaders and just natural disasters and economic imbalance and poverty and unrest and unruly people. Haiti is still to this day very, how can I say this? It's very nearsighted, it's very divided. There's people with so many different values and views, and even now it's hard for them to be able to come up with things that they're supposed to do. So, at the end, Haiti did gain its independence and their freedom from the French, which was ultimately their goal. But even till this day, they still go through problems like everyone else. But at the end, through this, they had showed that they could gain independence, be a force to be reckoned with, and to be able to show the rest of the nations and the rest of the world that they could be their own people, and they did. Thank you so much. I'm done.